Thank you so much, first of all of you for coming here and joining us to discuss an important question, which oftentimes we do not necessarily highlight a lot. My name is Rakhat Zholdoshalieva, and I am here today, as I said in the morning, introducing myself, on behalf of UNESCO, UNESCO's Institute for Lifelong Learning. We are based in Hamburg, Germany. But originally, as you can see my name, Rakhat Zholdoshalieva, I come from a Central Asian country, Kyrgyz Republic, Kyrgyzstan. And when I was listening to the story, I think what I heard was about the similar story that I went through myself. And I don't want to repeat all the wonderful, rich experience which was shared just now before me. But I just want to highlight how important our journey is to really record in understanding of, ourselves as learners and lifelong learners of languages as well, and developing our own literacies wherever we go. First of all, I would like to thank our partner Spokraft for organizing such a wonderful conference here and bringing all of us together to discuss. But also, I want to highlight that in the current situation, migration is nothing common. It's not really, it's not uncommon. What we want to highlight here is the journey of the migrants learning languages and becoming part of the societies where they are moving is critical for everybody to understand. All of the stakeholders, whether we are international organizations such as ourselves, or NGOs and wonderful creators of different technologies to expand the opportunities, but also teachers. And I happen to meet some of you here. Some of you are teaching adult migrants and refugees in the language classes. I won't talk too much about technology, informal language learning, but my focus would be a little bit broad, and I will be going very focused on the right to education, right to lifelong learning, as just being human beings, wherever we go. So before moving, I think, I don't know whether you can all of you see, but we have a PowerPoint we can share later on. Why don't we look at the definitions of who are we talking about? As this morning, Nisiona started with, we don't really differentiate, in the concept or in the definition of migrant, we will include all of these people, whether they are from refugee background or from the migrant background who are coming for specific purposes of academic improvement or training, or moving because of work, or by being part of creating new families. So I'm sure that my colleague from UNHCR is going to talk a little bit more about definition of refugee, but migrants is not really defined under international law, and sometimes is used very different national policymakers and ourselves as well. At the same time, we have another group of people where we talk about internally displaced people. These people are not necessarily in a different country context, but they are displaced because of conflict, natural disaster, and many other reasons within the borders of their own nations. But today we are talking about people from the perspective of UNESCO, we talk about people on the move, or those people who are actually leaving their the residences for different purposes, for employment, for fear of being persecuted by different kind of stakeholders, let me put it, stakeholders, conflict creators, or political, for political reasons. So we need to understand that, as Nisiona said, they come because of many reasons to our countries and become part of our life in society. Now, I don't want to go deeper into this discussion, but you can clearly see that international, when you look at the migration in general, it is very interesting to follow. I'm using two different kind of statistics here. One is from International Organization of Migration, and that's UN agency. Whereas the second one is actually more creative use or more creative conceptualization and visualization of migration flows. And I would like I would actually invite you to go and consult these resources to understand better about migration and probably some of our conceptions of who migrants are and migration itself as a concept may be actually improved, or some of the questions you have may be answered. And as you can see, on the right-hand side, it's a beautifully designed visual, shows how complex the migration flow is, as well as stock. And you can clearly see also on the chart, which is on the left hand, the international migrants in general, number of them are increasing. And in all the UN regions, we divide the world into UN regions. However, the greater degree increase is happening in Europe as well as Asia. It's an interesting just statistics to know as well. Oh, thank you. Now, in terms of language learning, literacy development of migrants, I think we have to be reminded of the International Declaration of Human Rights. And among these articles of the International Declaration of Human Rights, the individuals, irrespective of where they are, where they come from, where they live, they have right to education. And let's remember that, because that is how all the efforts are actually done or made to ensure that the right to education, and nowadays right to lifelong learning, is actually ensured by different stakeholders, where we become more sensitive to the needs, educational needs and training needs of the people who are moving from one place to another. I think somehow my remote control is not working. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Oh, sorry. At the back. Okay. Because well, he told me that I can move around. That's why I'm just taking it. Excellent. Thank you. Sorry. So technology has limitations, now. In terms of if we look at the issue a little bit closer to the 2015, we know that there are 17 SDG goals, or we call them Sustainable Development Goals. And the majority of these goals have emphasis or some kind of reference to migrants and refugees. And as I have already said, quality education is one of them. But more specifically and explicitly, it is mentioned in goal number 10, where we talk about reduced inequalities. And unlike the previous United Nations goals, like Millennium Development Goals, MDG we call it, migration is explicitly mentioned in the current Sustainable Development Goals, where it is not seen something negative, but is positive, that actually contributes not just to hosting countries, but also countries of origin, because it has a potential for development, for contributing back to their home countries, either financially, so that reducing poverty in their home country, but at the same time, bring expertise and human capital back to their countries and communities. And I think we would like to highlight that the languages people are learning in the countries where you are working, you are living, will be definitely contributing to overall global peace, understanding, cultural understanding, and diversity among ourselves. Because they will be bringing back so many information and knowledge back to their countries, whether they live physically or digitally. Now, I won't talk a lot. Our colleague is here from UNHCR to talk a little bit more, but we can also see on the UNHCR's very recent Refugee Education 2030 strategy, The strategic goals approaches include also they highlight also importance of education for refugees and migrants. I think here we have to highlight that a lot of emphasis, however, is given to children and youth. And I think we would welcome UNHCR for working with us also in the project, which we have been part of it, on expanding the educational opportunities and include the target group of adults as well. Now about our own institute, sorry, yeah, that's fine. Education in the Education 2030 Framework for Action, the emphasis of this goal is about ensuring inclusive, quality, and equitable education, as well as lifelong learning. And this is the first time when United Nations goal such as this refers to lifelong learning, not just education, because oftentimes it is understood as formal training, formal education, and leave out the entire journey of learning throughout one's life. And here we are talking about exactly the same story which our migrant story told us just now before me. Now, if you go narrow down the SDG goal number 4, there is one specific target that talks about literacy of adults and youth. And here, the target helps help the governments to monitor the situation, gather information on literacy needs, skills as well of the adult population and youth population. However, I want to highlight that that should include the statistics for migrants and refugees as well, which is currently not the case across all the countries, national governments. Now, if you look at another important angle that UNESCO works on, is the angle of the advocacy that we do for mother tongue-based multilingual education. And you know that we have a lot of languages in the world. Our human society is very blessed with a lot of languages. However, at the same time, we see decrease and loss of some languages. And I think the informal learning that we have and many people bring to the countries like Denmark, let's say, and the Nordic countries, we need to also celebrate diversity they bring in terms of language repertoires. And I think I heard very clearly speaking Polish, but learning English and Danish and going to the world with these language repertoires, not just seeing yourself as a recipient of the training of the languages, but also contributing to the language development and cultural diversity of these societies. Now, a very recent report that we conduct, a Global Education Monitoring Report, highlighted the importance of inclusion and education. And I won't go very detailed here. In here, we recommend countries and member states to broaden the definition of inclusion that includes not just people, women, who are oftentimes disadvantaged, people with disabilities, but we also talk about people on the move, who are refugees, migrants, and IDPs. And let me go back to the concept of literacy itself. Like many concepts, literacy itself also has been defined. I mean, you can see the evolvement of the definition, and the concept is expanded over and over. If 1978, the definition of literacy was about a person is literate who can, with understanding, both read and write short statement on his and her own everyday life. That's very narrow. In 2004, expert group with all the researchers and scholars in the field of literacy came together and expanded the notion. If you look at it now in the expanded notion in 2004, they started, they requested us to look into a little bit broader and include their different types of communication as well, computing, using printed and written materials. And at the same time, understand literacy as a continuum of learning. as a set of different proficiency levels. And I think a lot of language teachers here, you know about what is it, common European framework of languages. And this is where we also talk a little bit about the levels. Now, specifically, specifically in 2015, this became actually our current definition of literacy. And there you can see that we also included exactly the same proposals made by the expert group. And we incorporated this definition in our very recent strategy, UNESCO strategy for literacy. Today, literacy is not just reading and writing as a short sentence. And it includes in the conception itself, digital skills as very important competency of today's individuals. It also increasingly, it is no longer the basic ability to read and write a short sentence or text. It's more higher level of literacy. And at the same time, we recognize multilingual societies may require multilingual literacies. So, and the importance, if you narrow down to today's topic, then it's about mastery of the language of the host countries of the migrants, which actually becomes a critical part for their survival and integration in these societies. We also expand literacy's conception towards media and information literacy. And I think this is very important for us to pay attention, and our another unit looks at it more broadly, and I would invite you to also consult our website on that. And I think today's topic and some of the speakers will narrow down and talk a little bit more about this component or part of the literacy definition. In our study, we do every 3 years a global report on adult learning and education. And there what we find is that globally, we still have 773 million people who cannot read and write. However, this statistic does not include a literacy in another language. So migrant illiteracies, functional illiteracies, are not even included here. Now imagine this figure will be much bigger when we start collecting the data on the language and literacy skills of migrants and refugees in different languages. So what our report found is that 37% of the countries that responded to our survey did not know participation rates of minority groups such as refugee migrants in adult learning programs. 26%, not much prioritization was given by the government funding for refugee and migrant education. In the UNESCO literacy strategy, what we look at is components of importance of national literacy strategies where the needs of the refugee migrants should be included. But more specifically, goal number 2 highlights the equity and inclusion in the provision of literacy programs, especially disadvantaged groups such as refugees and migrants. And of course, technology that enhances the opportunities, expands the learning of this group as well as others. And critical part is collecting data, understanding and identifying scale of illiteracy, and in this case, among migrants and refugees. And from the lifelong learning perspective, we also believe that people learn throughout life until the end. We all learn, yeah? So our conception, our efforts has to be conceptualized from a lifelong learning perspective. That means not just single ministry, but multiple ministries and sectors and stakeholders have to work towards improving opportunities of different groups, including migrants. And here I give very quick definitions, which come from International Standard for Classification of Education, our Institute for Statistics. So the The definition now of education, lifelong learning, includes all modalities, not just formal training. So formal education, of course, is a critical part, and investment goes there. It's more visible. We know a little bit more. However, we don't know much about formal education. It's very short, sometimes provided by different stakeholders, providers, but we don't have much information about informal learning. But when we talk about education, we only see the tip of the iceberg. The rest of it remains a very rich journey of people's learning. However, we do not document necessarily. And I think today's conference is a brilliant one to discuss it explicitly. Did you stop it? I know I am done. The important is that all of our learners, as we are here today, we need to think about the different kind of theories that inform our work, practice, and provision, instruction as well. So here we need to understand our target groups. And today here I'm talking mostly about adults. So adults learn, I gave few points on from the andragogical as well as neuroscience perspective. Number 1 until 5 talks more andragogical theory of adult learning, where adults learn through experience, which we heard. They have to be ready to learn. You can't force on them. They need to be motivated to learn. They have very specific, very kind of a strong self-concept. We need to pay attention to that as well. And also they are actively involved in the creation of learning path for themselves and curriculum, and as well as experience as they go further. The neuroscience perspective is the one which I really like, because as I start becoming not very young, I feel like I want to read more what my matured brain is capable of. So neuroscience actually has good news so far, that our brain is very plastic. So we have opportunity to learn until the end of our life. I think that's a critical part, and I think it's a nice acknowledgement, no, that we can learn all the time. I'm about, this is the last one, okay? Literacy development and language learning are not synonymous, and all of you who are language specialists, you would know. So we differentiate between literacy acquisition, which is more about process of developing the ability to read, understand, and write using written symbols, okay? And here we talk about writing systems of different shapes and modality, no? And here we can add on top of it now digital. Language acquisition is a little bit different, because it's a process of developing the capacity to comprehend and speak a language. It's more broad, and it's also not just one language, it's a multiple language acquisition as well. In the highly text-based societies at the moment, language and literacy skills require the ability to express orally as well as in writing, access to information, and communicate in different languages in addition to our first language is very critical. So we are talking about multiple language as well as literacy acquisitions throughout life. And I think I won't talk about the last slide, which was a long slide, but that is part of our report, which we are launching very recently, and you will be able to read it online. However, my colleague Annapurna Ayappan is going to talk a little bit about the cases that we have collected from around the world on literacy learning that is supported through technologies such as Sparkrafts as well, how it enriches the learning opportunities for the people on the move. And thank you so much for your attention. I hope that, I'm really sorry I didn't keep my time. Yeah, thank you.